Before we dive into today's story, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end. And if this story moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and send it to a friend who needs to hear it. Now, let's begin. The air was heavy with rain, though the clouds had not yet broken. Selina Moore stood silently at the edge of the open grave, one hand clutching a black umbrella, the other resting over the swell of her 7-month belly. Beside her, her 10-year-old son Ethan clung tightly to her coat sleeve, as though that small piece of fabric was the only anchor he had left to stop him from floating away into despair. Around them, soft murmurs from the gathered mourners floated on the damp breeze. Such a tragedy, one woman whispered to another. He was far too young. A second voice responded, just low enough for Selina to catch. Yes, but you know his family. She won't last a month without him. Selina's eyes shifted across the grave to where her husband's relatives stood, faces pale, eyes dry, dressed in mourning clothes that looked like they'd been tailored more for display than grief. She felt no hatred for them, only the cold recognition that they had never truly accepted her. Not when she married their son, not when she built the floral business with him from a cramped back room into a downtown storefront, and certainly not now as the earth swallowed his coffin. By the time the last shovelful of dirt hit the wooden lid, Selina's shoes were soaked through. She shivered, not only from the chill seeping up through the wet ground, but from the knowledge that everything was about to change. Still, she clung to one hope, the will reading that would follow. Her husband had been a careful man, one who thought of his family before himself, and she believed he would have made provisions to protect her and their children. When she walked into the lawyer's office later that afternoon, the warmth of polished wood and the faint smell of paper wrapped around her like a temporary shelter. She sat stiffly in the leather chair, Ethan's small hand pressed into hers, as the lawyer opened the folder. His voice was steady, formal, detached as he read aloud her husband's last instructions. To my wife, Selina Moore, I leave our home at 27 Oak Ridge Street, my shares in more blooms and decor, and the 1972 van. Selina exhaled softly, relief rippling through her. The house, the business, and yes, even the old van her husband had always been strangely sentimental about. For a moment, her shoulders loosened. The relief lasted only seconds before her sister-in-law's laugh cracked through the silence like breaking glass. "Oh, no," the woman said, exchanging a smug glance with her brother. "That's not how it's going to work." Selina blinked at her in confusion. "Excuse me," she asked, her voice calm but edged with warning. Her father-in-law leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, his tone clipped. "The house and the business are family property. You married into them. You don't own them. The only thing you get is the van. Frankly, you're lucky we're letting you have that much." The lawyer frowned, flipping through the papers. "That's not," he began, but the old man cut him off sharply. "Do you want trouble, Selina? Take us to court. Let's see how far you get, pregnant, with no money, no influence, and 2 mouths to feed." Ethan's small fingers tightened painfully around hers. The room seemed to tilt as the stench of stale coffee mingled with her rising nausea. Selina wanted to fight, to speak, but she recognized the trap. They were daring her to struggle in their arena, one they had always controlled. She pressed her lips together and stayed silent. 15 minutes later, Selina stepped out of the office into the gray drizzle with nothing but a set of van keys in her palm. Behind her, faint laughter carried from the windows like a mockery trailing her steps. Ethan walked beside her, his eyes searching hers for reassurance she could not give. He finally whispered, "Mom, this isn't real, right? Dad wouldn't let them take everything, right?" Selina forced her face to remain still, but each step felt heavier than the last. She ran her hand along the van parked at the edge of the lot, its metal side flaking rust like brittle paper. This was her inheritance now, this and the small boy gripping her sleeve. For the first time that day, a strange, stubborn thought rooted itself inside her chest. Fine. If this is all they've left me, I'll make it enough. The drizzle thickened into mist as they crossed the parking lot. The van leaned beneath a flickering lamp post, its paint bubbled and scarred by years of decay. One back door sagged like it had long ago given up the will to close properly. The driver's side mirror was patched with layers of duct tape. Selina tugged the heavy door open, and a wave of mildew, stale oil, and rusted air rolled out. Ethan climbed in first, sliding across the cracked vinyl seat, his small hands tracing the splits as though they were secret maps. "Mom," he whispered, voice almost pleading, "we're not really going to live in this, are we?" Selina didn't answer. She dropped the keys into the cup holder, her eyes fixed on the dusty dashboard where faint fingerprints still lingered. Her husband's, from the last time he had tinkered with it. For a long moment, she simply breathed, then whispered to herself, "We'll survive." That night, they parked on the far edge of an abandoned lot behind a closed hardware store. The hum of the streetlights above blended with the distant rush of traffic. Selina wrapped Ethan in a thin blanket, tucking it tight around his shoulders before lowering herself onto the narrow back bench. Her swollen belly made it awkward, but exhaustion pressed heavier than discomfort. Voices drifted faintly through the van walls. Two men passing on the sidewalk. "That's the Moore widow, right?" one asked. "Yeah," came the reply. "Heard. She lost everything. The family took it all. She was too proud. Never begged. Guess she will now." Selina stared at the ceiling, jaw tightening. The baby kicked inside her, a reminder pulsing against her ribs. You don't have time to break. The next morning, the chill woke her before the sun. She rummaged through the small suitcase she had managed to save, pulling out a sweater with frayed cuffs. Ethan was still asleep, curled tight like he was bracing against a storm. She kissed his forehead before stepping outside into the damp gray dawn. She had no house, no shop, and no safety net. Only a rusted van and the determination not to collapse. She whispered under her breath, as though her husband could hear, "I'll keep them safe. I'll find a way." The promise hung in the morning air, fragile but fierce. She didn't know yet that the van's value went far beyond its battered shell. Days blurred into a rhythm of survival. Selina rose with the sun, walking to the corner store to buy discounted bread. She split it with Ethan in the van, then spent hours scouring bulletin boards for scraps of work, cleaning, carrying, anything that earned coins. At night, she returned to their metal shell, wrapping Ethan tight as they listened to the city outside. Ethan drew little figures on the misted windows, stick families holding hands. Selina wiped and polished every corner of the van she could reach, trying to make it less of a tomb, more of a home. It was during one of these cleanings, her sponge dragging across the rear door, that her hand snagged on a sharp edge. Rust flaked away, revealing a metal sliver beneath. But it wasn't steel. The color beneath gleamed warm and dense. Her breath caught. It was not paint. It was gold. Selina frowned, running her thumb across the sliver. Smooth, almost glowing, unlike anything she had ever seen on a vehicle. She pressed harder, peeling away more of the brittle surface. The strip widened, catching the morning sunlight just right. Her pulse quickened. For a moment, the entire van seemed to shimmer with potential. Her husband's words echoed in her mind. "That van is our safety net." She had always dismissed it as sentiment. Now, touching the panel, feeling its unnatural weight, she realized the truth was more complex. The van was heavy, far heavier than it had any right to be. She pressed her palm flat against it, whispering, "Not yet." Because this wasn't just luck. This was a secret, and secrets had to be protected. Selina didn't rush. The next days she worked as though nothing had changed. But when the opportunity came, she carefully pried a narrow strip loose from the inside panel and slipped it into her pocket. At a discreet jeweler across town, she placed it silently on the counter. The man didn't ask questions. He weighed it, nodded, and handed her an envelope. The money inside was more than she had earned in months. With it, she bought Ethan fresh clothes, prenatal vitamins, and enough food to feed them without rationing. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt a fragile seed of hope. The van was no longer a prison. It was the lifeline her husband had left her, the lifeline her in-laws had mocked and tossed to her feet without understanding. Weeks slipped by, and Selina mastered the art of keeping her secret. She worked every odd job she could find, but quietly every few days, she returned to the van with her tools. She chipped away at small pieces of the concealed treasure, never enough to leave a mark visible to wandering eyes. The first sale had taught her caution. Wealth could destroy just as quickly as it could save. At night, as Ethan slept curled against her, she whispered promises to the unborn child within her. "I'll give you both a life better than this," she murmured. "I won't let them break us." Her voice was soft, but her determination sharpened with each word. The van had become a lifeboat, and she would learn to sail it through storm and shadow alike. With the second sale of gold, Selina rented a tiny corner stall at a weekend market. The space was narrow, with peeling paint on the shutters, but it was hers. She bought a few second-hand vases and a small bundle of wholesale flowers, roses, lilies, and sprigs of eucalyptus. Her hands, though rough from weeks of survival, remembered every movement of arrangement. She tied ribbons with practiced care, set stems at angles that invited the eye, and breathed life into bouquets as if weaving hope into each bloom. Ethan sat beside her, sketching flowers on scrap paper, occasionally calling out, "Mom, look at this one!" Selina smiled, pride warming her chest. Passers-by began to notice. "Who's the new florist?" one whispered. "She's got a gift," another replied. "Isn't that Moore's widow? I thought she was living in a van." Selina heard the whispers but kept her head down. Her blossom spoke, louder than gossip. Business grew, slowly but steadily. Each coin earned was reinvested into better flowers, brighter displays, sturdier vases. Selina arrived before dawn, often working long after the market closed. Ethan handed out sprigs of baby's breath to customers, grinning shyly for luck, he'd say. Selina's heart ached with both pride and sorrow. Her husband should have been there to see it, the life sprouting again from the ashes of ruin. Some evenings Selina returned to the van and stared at the rusted panels, whispering, "They'll never know." She guarded the secret as fiercely as she guarded her children, for she understood now. The van wasn't simply holding gold. It was holding their freedom. Across town, her in-laws were drowning in their own arrogance. The shops they had seized from her crumbled under their mismanagement. Orders went unfulfilled. Suppliers cut ties. Debts piled high. Customers whispered complaints that traveled swiftly through the community. Selina overheard them in her own stall. "The Moores are finished. They never worked a day in their lives. Figures their empire is falling apart." She never added a word to the conversation. She simply kept arranging flowers, her movements graceful, her lips curved in the faintest of knowing smiles. She didn't need revenge. She only needed to build. And as she built, the world began to notice her more than it noticed them. By the time Selina's daughter was born, the stall had transformed into a sunlit corner shop with a green awning and a name painted in shimmering gold script. Ethan and Rose, named for her 2 children. Inside, the air carried the sweet perfume of lilies, peonies, and eucalyptus. Customers no longer came just for flowers. They came for the way Selina treated them, remembered their names, remembered their stories. She slipped tiny sprigs of luck into every bouquet, smiling as she handed them across the counter. Ethan sat at the back desk, proudly sketching designs for arrangements. Her daughter slept in a woven basket nearby, and through the wide windows, the rusted van still sat beneath its leaning lamppost, overlooked by everyone but Selina. To others, it was junk. To her, it was a vault of second chances. The downfall of her in-laws was no longer whispered rumor. It became a headline. "More floral chain declares bankruptcy." More estate listed for immediate sale. Selina read the news calmly as she folded ribbons at her counter. Customers chatted about the family's collapse, shaking their heads. "They were cruel to that widow," one woman murmured. Now look at them. Homeless, penniless. Selina kept her silence. There was no satisfaction in their ruin, only the quiet knowledge that the seeds of greed always strangled themselves. She had not lifted a hand against them, yet justice had unfolded all the same. And still she worked. Because her focus was not on revenge. It was on her children, her flowers, and the roots she was laying in soil no one could take from her. One quiet afternoon, Selina was wrapping a bouquet for a young bride when the shop door opened with a soft creak. She glanced up and froze. Standing in the doorway was her father-in-law, thinner than she remembered, his once-pressed suit worn at the elbows. Behind him shuffled her sister-in-law, eyes downcast, stripped of the arrogance she once carried like perfume. "Selina," the old man said, his voice rougher, smaller. We've hit a rough patch. The house is gone. The business too. We have nowhere else to go. We need a place to stay. Just until we get back on our feet." His words trailed into silence as he looked around her thriving shop, the flowers glowing like living proof of her resilience. Her sister-in-law's eyes flicked nervously from the gold lettering on the sign to the pen Selina used to write receipts. They understood now what they had thrown away. Selina tied the bouquet's ribbons slowly, her fingers calm, her heart steady. She didn't look up until the knot was firm. "I remember," she said quietly, "the day you told me the van was all I deserved, that my children and I deserved nothing." Her words hung in the air like a blade suspended between them. She finally met their eyes, not with anger, but with the same measured calm she used when deciding which flowers to trim and which to let bloom. Her sister-in-law's lips trembled. Her father-in-law cleared his throat, desperate. "Selina, please. We are family. You can't leave us on the street." Selina slid the bouquet across the counter to the waiting bride, her voice soft but unyielding. "I'm afraid I don't have room. Some things are too small to hold the weight of the people who once tried to break them." The words sealed the moment. The bell above the door chimed as they left, their silence louder than any insult they had ever spoken. Evening light spilled through the shop windows, bathing the petals in warm gold. Selina sat at the counter, her newborn daughter sleeping in a basket beside her, Ethan sketching with a quiet smile across the way. She glanced out at the van through the glass. It sat exactly where it had always been, rusted, quiet, unassuming. No one passing by would ever guess it had changed everything. The gold within had bought her second chances, but it wasn't the metal alone that built her new life. It was her choice to keep moving when it would have been easier to stop, to work when despair tried to chain her down, to turn bitterness into something that could bloom. She imagined her husband standing in the doorway, arms folded, pride shining in his eyes. For the first time since his death, she felt him with her. Selina brushed a stray petal from the counter and looked around her thriving shop. She didn't need a mansion. She didn't need the stolen businesses. She didn't even need the family name. She had roots now, deep, steady, unshakable. Customers often asked about the old van parked under the lamppost, and Selina would smile faintly, replying, "It's just part of the story." Because the truth was this: gold could hide in the ugliest places, and those who mocked your worth often handed you the keys to your own freedom without even realizing it. Selina leaned down, kissed her daughter's tiny forehead, and whispered, "We're safe now." And as Ethan proudly held up his drawing for her to see, she knew the future was theirs, crafted not from the ashes of cruelty, but from the quiet strength of choosing to bloom. Like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this, and let us know where you are watching from under the comment section.